this episode, I interview Brad Mangin, one of the best baseball photographers I've ever met. Well, I want to welcome Brad Mangin, a photographer based in the San Francisco area, correct?
Yes.
Yes. I've known you for a long time. I don't get to see you as often as I used to, being like World Series games, things like that.
Yeah.
But it has been a while. We're both a couple of the relics.
Well, Scott, it's nice to be here. I miss the old days of World Series in St. Louis and seeing you and Dillip and your crew in St. Louis. It's been way too long, but thanks so much for asking me to join you today.
Oh, happy to. Can you tell me a little bit about your journey into photography? Like, what sparked your interest? Do you remember way back when what you really said, hey, this is kind of interesting, this is kind of fun?
Well, I got lucky in that, like a lot of people, I owe so much to a great teacher. In high school, I went to Washington High School in Fremont, California, which is here in the East Bay area, just right in the middle of, if you were to draw a line north and south between Oakland and San Jose, Fremont is right in the middle. And we had this high school photography teacher, Paul Ficken, who was amazing. And my best friend, Joe Gosen, who I grew up with, had taken photography. And back then we had this stuff go on in the state of California where if you were college prep, you couldn't take an elective till your junior year. And in my first semester of my junior year, my mom made me take typing because that was a big deal back in the day. You needed to learn how to type. And so I wasn't able to take an elective till my second semester of my junior year. And I finally took photography. Joe said, you got to take photography because Paul Ficken is a great teacher. And I knew nothing about photography, but I thought it sounded fun. And I just immediately fell in love with photography just from a basic photo class of, shooting black and white film and learning about photography. I'd always been like to draw. I really like to draw. My mom was an art major and an art teacher, and then my dad was a high school basketball coach and played Division I basketball in the 50s against the great Bill Russell USF teams that won a national championship. And so I had a sports background from my dad, and just fell in love with photography in high school. And then by the time my senior year, I was taking multiple photo classes, working for the yearbook. And me and my buddy Joe at the same time decided we wanted to get into photojournalism and be newspaper photographers, and went to the local junior college, got our AA degrees together in photojournalism, transferred to San Jose State, which at the time in the mid-'80s had one of the top 5 photojournalism programs in the country. And, newspapers was a great, viable profession to be a newspaper staff photographer back then. And that's all I ever wanted to do. And went to San Jose State, majored in photojournalism, graduated in the fall of '88, and interned at a local newspaper called the Contra Costa Times in the Bay Area in Walnut Creek, and got to cover a little of everything besides doing high school and Little League. Did a lot of pro sports and college sports in the Bay Area, and that just really kind of got me going. That's as quick and short an answer as I can say. But it was a different time. Newspapers was a great way to go. We had incredible papers in the Bay Area: the San Jose Mercury News, the San Francisco Chronicle, San Francisco Examiner. We had photographers winning. Steve Raymond at the Chronicle won MPPA Photographer of the Year 2 years in a row in the mid-'80s, and we had some of the best photographers around that would come to our school and do photo nights, MPPA nights, and show us their portfolios. And we were able to learn from so many amazing photographers and see their pictures in the paper every day. And it was a really exciting time to learn from some of the best.
That's awesome. I want to touch back on one of the things you said as far as in the early years of school, taking art classes. That used to be a big thing in photography where it helped if you took an art class or knew something. Did you feel, I know most of your career has been sports. Do you feel that those art classes helped you?
Well, it's fun. In junior high, I took drafting. I was always like the anal, like, if you gave me a coloring book, I'm going to color in between the lines. So, like, drafting, I was really good at drafting. I took some drafting classes in college. I mean, not college, in high school, too. And this is obviously because I'm old. This is not not the current modern stuff where you're doing it on a computer, because there were no computers. This is all on a drafting board and with pencils and T-squares and stuff. And so I was always very concise, organized and stuff, and realism, and I loved doing that kind of stuff. I was an art minor in college. I don't know. I always say that my mom taught me how to see because of her art background. I always thought that I had a pretty good eye. I could look at things and see things. That's a big part of photography. I mean, I've known plenty of photographers who were great technicians but just didn't have a good eye. Just because you know how to work a camera and stuff and could handle certain situations, if you don't have a good eye and you can't see, your pictures are gonna lack certain qualities. And we've all known photographers that have superior eyes and that are able to see a special way. And definitely. I always like to give my mom credit for helping me be able to. I always thought I could see pretty well, see certain things, and having an art background. I mean, I've known photographers that here in San Francisco, we had a great school that's still around, the San Francisco Academy of Art, where photographers, my good friend, Pulitzer Prize winner Deanne Fitzmaurice, who won a Pulitzer at the Chronicle in 2005. Deanne went to the Academy of Art in the mid-'80s, and she always had a great artistic view on the city of San Francisco, and Deanne's pictures always had just a cool look about them. And she had this art background, and certain photographers have a different look on things, and I always thought it helped when people do have an art background.
When you mentioned certain photographers have a certain look, that was my next question. Is in photojournalism, since that's where you were starting, did you have a favorite style, subject? Is there something that you always really kind of looked for, or just kind of covered what you saw?
Well, it was back then, back in the 80s, everything was the only way to learn. Again, there's no internet to look at. You joined the NPPA, the National Press Photographers Association. You got the monthly News Photographer magazine, which published the monthly clip winners. So you saw all the clip winners. And then you got the annual POI book, which published all the annual POI winners. And back then, most of it was black and white. Everything, you call it, it was the MPPA POI style. Everything was long lens. It was Dodge burned. Prints were bleached. I mean, everything was, the corners are burned in. Everything was tight, and it was a different look and feel. Newspaper reproduction was not good. Pictures had to be able to read quickly in the paper, and pictures weren't necessarily going to run real big. And they had to have a certain appeal, and it's a wide scenic, of a certain situation is not going to run in your paper because it's going to fall apart in a 65 or 72 line screen with a bad letterpress. It's not going to reproduce. They need to run something tight that shows what's going on, that's going to reproduce and read in newsprint. And so in the beginning, it was a very kind of quick and dirty, almost just AP style. It was a different thing. The way I shot really changed and evolved as I got a little bit older into the 90s and started going more to when I started working for Sports Illustrated. Suddenly you're shooting a lot of chrome and working for a glossy magazine where you have great reproduction and pictures run 2 pages in the magazine. And that's a whole thing I can get into later, where it's like things evolve and change as who you're working for, technology, the printed page, and reproduction allows for pictures to run bigger and read better.
Right. So tell me, because the Sports Illustrated aspect of your career, how did that come about?
Well, big thing for me, my big amazing opportunity happened in 1990 when I was 20. I was a 25-year-old just punk ass kid working at the Contra Costa Times after I graduated. After I graduated, I was hired at one of their smaller papers in a little town called Danville, the San Valley Times, a little 15,000 circulation paper covering a lot of high school and little league. Still doing some of the pros for the big paper. The big paper hired me. They had an opening, so I was back in the big plant, and we were about 100,000 circulation, and I was literally there only a couple months, and I was hired by Neil Leifer and Frank DeFord to be the Bay Area staff photographer for this thing called the National Sports Daily, which was this incredible daily sports newspaper that started in January of 90 in New York, Chicago, and LA, and they were expanding to all the major markets. And San Francisco was starting in July of 90. And this is a thing, every major country in Europe, all over the world, had daily sports newspapers, except for the United States. And the richest guy in Mexico had put up $100 million to front the business. Frank DeFord, at the time, arguably the greatest, most famous sports writer in America, was the editor, and Neil Leifer was the director of photography, and I got my portfolio to him, and he hired me as the San Francisco staff photographer, and it was just so incredible opportunity. After being at the big paper in Walnut Creek for only 2 months, I quit because it was an incredible opportunity, and so getting to work there for a year, in 1 year at age 25, I'm shooting the World Series, the Super Bowl, the NBA Finals. We always had money problems. Technology was expensive. I mean, we were printing our own paper. Distribution was tough. The product was amazing. It was a 48-page tabloid. My gosh, we had incredible writers. I mean, you talk to anyone who's old enough who knows what the National was, and they revered the paper. The product was amazing. But it was during the recession. The ads were, there were a lot of days where we just only had one ad in the double track of the magazine, of the paper, and one on the back page, Visa or Nike. And the ads just plummeted because of the recession and stuff. But being able to work for Neil, meet a lot of people, I met a lot of the SI people, that really gave my career a head start. At age 25, we went out of business and folded. The day Michael Jordan and the Bulls won Game 5 of the 91 NBA Finals at the Forum against the Lakers to win their first championship. That was June 12th or June 13th of 1991. I was working with Chris Cavada down at the Forum, and we both became unemployed that day. And that started a series of events where I was unemployed for quite a while and kicked around, and got a small newspaper job in the Bay Area, and then eventually started freelancing for good in August of 93. I had started doing a few things for SI at the end of 92 and went just full-time freelancing for good in August of 93 for SI. And thanks to the great VJ Lovero for Upper Deck trading cards via the Lovero Group down in Orange, California.
Yeah, the funny thing is, we mentioned Neil many times. I have a couple books, and it's just so cool going through those over and over again. I actually got to shoot a spring training baseball game next to him. I want to say it was like around 91. That's my guess, 92. But he was there to shoot Ozzie Smith, the Cardinals shortstop, sitting on the stools. You're right there, basically like on the warning track. You're just so close in spring training. And Ozzie comes up to bat. He puts a new roll of film in his camera. Of all things, Ozzie hits a triple, and he's focusing up the line over to second base, sliding into third, and just nonchalantly takes that roll out, puts another roll in, and it was just like, wow, that was cool.
Man, Neil's a piece of work. Neil is a piece of work. Thing about Neil, I learned if I called Neil for anything, if he wasn't there, he got your message, he would always return the call. Neil would always return calls. Phone calls are very important. If Neil Leifer could return your call, then any other clown editor in the country is not too busy to return your call. And there's nothing worse than picture editors and people that are too busy to ever return your calls. You know, Neil Leifer can return your call, then you can return my call. And
exactly.
Neil is always the best, returns every call. Your message is important to him, and he cared. Working for him, my God, he would raise holy hell in the newsroom at the National. A lot of people that hated him there because he didn't care. Because Frank Ford had his back. Frank had Neil's back, and Neil would fight for our pictures in the paper, and he would call, like, you know, I'm on the West Coast shooting, you know, night A's games with, you know, the great A's teams with Jose Canseco and Ricky Henderson and those guys and Mark McGwire, and, you know, I'm filing pictures, you know, late at night while he's at home, and then he'd come in the next morning and he would call me and wake me up to tell me, like, that he liked my picture in the paper. You know, I mean, that was Neil. That was he supported his photographers, and it was at a young age. I mean, I got spoiled. I'm a 25-year-old punk working for Neil, and, like, my God, this is, you know, I learned quickly that that's not, you know, how it is generally at most places.
Right. Yeah. One thing I do like that you said is about meeting people, meeting the SI people, and I tell young kids that want to be in photography, you know, get to know a lot of people, you know, whether you're just following somebody on social or what, and we'll talk about social a little bit later, but it just, the more people you can meet and listen to them, the better. It can open up opportunities. It could just help your career as far as being a better person, just to experience people and talk and listen to them. That's, in my mind, one of the most important things. I've always said it's really strange when every time I went to a new ballpark, new arena, stadium, whatever, I would try to find the team guy, and I would say, you know, what are the rules and what's this and what's that, and tell me where, you know, vantage points are and stuff. And too many times in the last, you know, 10 years or so, you know, somebody comes into one of our buildings and doesn't even say hello.
Yeah, that drives me up the wall. I always tell people, look, you first time you ever go somewhere, first thing you've got to find the team photographer. That is their building. You need to pay your respects, find out the rules, find out where you can and can't go, and it's going to make your job so much easier. They're going to love that you came and said hello. They're going to take care of you. They're great people. You know, they're going to welcome you to their building, and it's going to go well for you. And I see it all the time. You have people show up and they don't. You know, they walk through the dugout looking for a drinking fountain. I've seen that during the game.
Oh, God.
I mean, I've literally seen that, and it's a different deal. I mean, it's, you know, one bar. I mean, in the old days when there was money and people would travel, you know, when the trading card business was big, and a lot of us did so many jobs for all the different trading card companies in the 90s, and we'd fly all over the country. You got to meet so many different people back then because everyone was traveling, and so that was a great way of, you know, I met so many people back then just because, you know, I mean, I'm in the Bay Area, and, you know, I'm shooting a Steelers game on a Sunday, or I'm shooting a Packers game, or I'm shooting whatever, just for Upper Deck, you know, and you know, all the film, you're shooting chrome and you're looking for a day game, and so people would congregate to the certain games, and you see a lot of the same people, and it was always so great, and learn from these people. You know, I can remember going to Boston in '94 for Upper Deck before the baseball strike in August of '94, and this was like in July. And I'm there for a weekend series, Red Sox and Orioles, and Al Tielmans was there for SI doing an SI story on, like, the Orioles pitching staff. And on Saturday night after the game, I remember I went to the airport with Al. He had to ship film, and then we went out to dinner. And I'd known Al a little bit because he had actually worked with us for the National. Neil had hired him for the National, and Al had done some of the 1990 World Series with us in Cincinnati, and so I knew Al a little bit. But we went out to dinner, and he gave me a big lecture about copyright. We talked a lot about copyright and stuff, and so it was always great to meet up with photographers and learn business stuff. And I mean, that was 32 years ago. And I remember going out to dinner with Alan Boston that night and talking and learning some stuff from him. And there was, nowadays, obviously there's no money and no one travels. And, I mean, every once in a while a team photographer goes on a trip but right. You go to the ballpark. And in the old days when the Mariners would come to Oakland, you got a dome team who might play 10 games out in the sunshine the entire season. They come to Oakland on a getaway Thursday afternoon. My God, there'd be, 8 photographers from out of town just to shoot Griffey, in the sunshine. Here, Mitch Haddad's on the plane from L.A., John Sue, who's on the plane from L.A., everyone's on the plane from L.A.,
Right.
We're all out there, because it's Griffey in the sun. You can shoot chrome on Ken Griffey because every home game is in the Kingdome. Most of the road games are at night or somewhere bad, and you get them in the Oakland Coliseum sunshine, and you got to get them on chrome. And so people would swarm in, or if Randy Johnson was pitching. My God, That's a huge unicorn. Randy Johnson might pitch, out of his 32 starts, he might pitch in the sunshine twice all season. And so those games, everyone would come, and you'd see everybody. It was crazy.
Yeah, I actually did a couple games for the Astros because they had the dome, and when they would come to St. Louis, and they used some stuff like in their media guide or whatever yearbook. But that was the thing. It's like you just don't have pictures of those guys, in the daytime, and it's like such a different look. Do you have any? I mean, in your career, such a storied career, all the baseball you've shot, books you've put out, all that kind of stuff. Is baseball your favorite sport to photograph?
Yeah, I mean, I like doing other stuff, but baseball as a kid, it was my favorite sport, and I always felt that it's the sport that I know the best and that I followed the most. When you're working for a newspaper, obviously you shoot everything. I did 8 million little kid soccer games, during soccer season, and it's, Pee Wee football, and then it's little kids basketball. High school, I did 8 million high school football games and college games, and I did tons of 49er games and Raider games when they moved back here in '95 before they left again. And so I've done tons of stuff, but what happens, sometimes good, sometimes bad, at places like Sports Illustrated, is you tend to specialize after a while. They have people that just really excel at certain things. And, living here at the time, we were one of the few markets that obviously had both an American League and a National League team. So you got A's and Giants. And back then the schedules were done better. They were done by that old couple that did the schedules manually. And before interleague play, there were never any overlaps between the A's and Giants.
Right.
No overlaps at all. So we had just, a game every day. And so with more day games combined, even than Chicago. So we had just tons of day games. So that's, and you had to shoot chrome. For any client, it was worth the shit that was going to pay you any amount of money. And so the card companies or SI, they needed photographers here to shoot good pictures because color neg was trash. No one wanted color neg. No one's going to pay you a nickel for color neg. It's in the garbage. So living here was great. I love baseball. People wanted baseball. And then once I started doing a lot of work for SI, it's like, it's not just the home teams, it's the visiting team. Who's coming to town?
Right.
And then our parks were good to shoot at. So I started to get to just do a lot of baseball. And it just kind of worked out really good for me because I love doing it.
Do you have a second favorite sport?
Probably football. I mean, I like basketball fine, but basketball, I did it. My dad was a coach. I went to 8 million basketball games when I was a kid. I shot it for the paper when it was, available light stuff. I did a lot of work for the NBA in the 90s on strobes. But then once I started working for SI, if they needed basketball, they have, on the West Coast, we had John McDonough. So you're not going to have me shoot basketball. You can have John McDonough shoot basketball. So it's there's no reason to have me shoot basketball. So that's how it is. And it's like for basketball stuff, they had like SI had like the best basketball photographers, around that were going to do their basketball because it was all strobed and 8 million remotes and back when guys were shooting Hasselblad, were shooting with a Hasselblad and doing all this crazy stuff. So
right.
that was a whole different deal. So I haven't shot basketball in a million years because it was a whole different deal.
Right. You have so many memorable experiences, I'm sure. Do you have something, whether it be good or bad, that really kind of just sticks out that you always remember? That's a tough one.
Yeah, yeah, God, I mean, I have great memories of going to games when I was a kid. Certain games. I have all my ticket stubs from all my games when I was a kid. Shooting stuff. I mean, the best memories for me are the people. Are
right.
Hanging out with the friends and spring training dinners at spring training. I mean, spring training. You never got to do spring training in Arizona. The spring trainings we were able to do in Arizona for so long. I mean, my first spring training was in '91. Back then, we only had 8 teams in Arizona, and then it grew to 15. And being able to stay in one hotel in Scottsdale and doing, in the beginning, I did spring training for Upper Deck, which meant we shot everybody, and then I did a lot of spring trainings for Sports Illustrated, which meant we covered everybody. So every day I'd be going to a different game. I could stay in one hotel, unlike Florida, where I did Florida once for Upper Deck in the '90s, where you got to drive all over the state.
Right.
And being able to stay in one hotel and have a list of guys I need to shoot, and before the internet, before Twitter, it was a pain in the ass. You have to call PR guys and find out who's in the lineup and to determine where game you're going to go to. But once Twitter came out and beat writers and teams would tweet out the lineups early in the morning, right. And then you could find out where I can go here, I can go there, and you can just get in your car and go to a game. And when there were still photographers being paid to go to spring training, hardly anyone goes anymore. But back in the day, we'd have dinners every night of 8 to 10 to 12 to 15 people at our favorite restaurants. And Michael Zagaris' birthday is February 22nd, and we had this great Italian restaurant in Old Town Scottsdale, the Italian Grotto, that was owned and operated by this just crazy Yankee fan from the Bronx named Gary Horowitz. And Gary was just a fucking maniac. And this restaurant was full of scouts, writers, us photographers, and umpires. And we would go there all the time and hang, especially we got to know a lot of the umpires, like Ron Culpa and Bill Miller and some of these characters that had condos nearby who would ride golf carts around Old Town Scottsdale, hammered, smoking cigars and stuff. And they would hang out with us and have dinner with us, and we'd have a birthday dinner for Z. And our last one was his 70th birthday, which was in 2015, which was my last spring training. I mean, we had 30 people there. People flew in from Robert Seale flew in from Houston. Paul Cunningham flew in from New York. People, Steve Fine flew in from New York. People would fly in from all over for Z's birthday at spring training and make a big weekend out of it. And we'd have these just amazing times. It was always the people that made it so. In the '90s, VJ Lovero was our ringleader. We would back then for Upper Deck, we didn't have to edit. We'd shoot and ship our film, put it in FedEx, Richard Maxon's lab, West Side Processing in Santa Monica, and then VJ had the keys to the Angels complex, and we would meet at the Angels complex, and we'd play Over the Line. And just a bunch of me and VJ and Bob and Lou Sorich and John Cordes and Tim Mantuani and a big group of us, and then we'd play until literally we were like little kids until sunset, and then we'd all go back to our condos or houses or hotels where we were, and then we'd regroup at 8 o'clock for dinner somewhere. And we do this every day. We were children.
Speaking of spring training, did you have to do headshots?
See, now I hated doing lighting stuff. I wasn't good at it. Didn't want any part of it. I never did photo. The only photo days I did is once I started doing my iPhone stuff, I would go do iPhone stuff on photo days. My first year was 2012, where I would just shoot stuff with my phone. I never was one of the official guys doing photo days.
Yeah, I couldn't remember that, but I knew, yeah. And I'm glad you brought up the iPhone because that was my next question, is you've done a lot of really cool projects with the iPhone. How did that come about?
People had been fooling around with Instagram and doing stuff, and I thought it would be really fun to do that. And that winter, I started goofing around, taking pictures of my cats and playing around. And then I went to spring training end of February for my editor, Nate Gordon at SI, and no one had done anything like this before. Instagram was pretty new, and I thought, people were tweeting, writers would tweet things, and I thought, well, I'm going to do, Instagram back then, no one put real pictures on Instagram. People just took stupid pictures of their food or whatever.
Right.
And I thought, well, I'm going to do, here I am in the dugout, or here I am. I never was able to afford a Hasselblad, so I never shot square format, but I liked the square format. Back then, Instagram, you were locked into a square. You couldn't do anything else. And I thought, I want to prove to people that it's not the camera, it's the photographer. I'm going to prove to people that you can make really good pictures of the phone and do cool squares. So I started shooting details of the dugout in Scottsdale in the spring training. And my editor, Nate, loved what I was doing. It was very encouraging, and I just kept doing it, and I started getting a real good response from people and building followers. And like the San Francisco Giants, no one knew what to do with social media. It was completely rogue all over the place. And then the Giants, I did some really good Giants pictures, and the Giants social media started sharing some of my pictures and tagging them, which got me followers. And then Nate at SI kept encouraging me and said that he wanted to publish some of my stuff. And then finally, and Steve Fine loved what I was doing. Walter Yost was super supportive. I mean, people were really supportive. Of course, there are always some jackass clowns that were giving me shit like, well, why are you doing that? Are you making any money? I'm like, I'm having fun. It's photography. I'm having fun. But I was working. This was when business was still good. I was working for SI all the time. I mean, I'm there taking pictures with my real cameras, but I'm doing little iPhones. I mean, I'm in dugouts posing players with my phone. I mean, I'm doing, especially in Oakland where we could do that, and I'm having a blast. And then, I'm starting to pick up followers, and then right before the London Olympics, there was a dead week, and then Nate and Steve, they went to bat for me, and I got all 3 leading offs in Sports Illustrated in this July issue right before the London Olympics. So 6 pages, 3 double trucks of 18 of my square Instagrams. And it was a big deal. It was a major news story in the tech world. It was the first time a glossy magazine had turned over that much space to iPhone pictures. It was a huge deal. It's an iPhone 4S, and which is crazy. And that helped me by September, I signed a book contract with a local publisher and had a book come out at the spring of the following year, 2013. I was shooting the World Series that year for Major League Baseball. I didn't know where it would be, of course. It ended up being the Giants beat the Tigers. They swept them 4 games in Detroit. So I ended up, the book was from the beginning of spring training through the Giants winning the World Series, and then I shot the parade. So it was like the entire season. I got my awesome friend, the great, sadly late, Pedro Gomez from ESPN, wrote the introduction, and it's a really fun book. And I mean, it's basically, I was the first person to ever do legit social media, sports/baseball photography. I mean, I was doing pictures in the dugout, the bats, the balls, the details. No one was doing that, and then everyone started doing. I mean, it was crazy. And you look back at the book and the pictures, and they really hold up well. They're pretty. I mean, I got Bryce Harper to pose for me when in 2012. He's a kid. I asked him during batting practice in San Francisco when he's with the Nationals, but he's just in a shitty BP top, and he's like, oh, let me change and come out in my real jersey. And he came out, and he's in one of the pictures that's on the cover of the book. I mean, young Bryce Harper's on the cover of the book. He posed for me. It was really a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. And that work is amazing. You actually got hired to shoot events with just your iPhone, correct?
Yeah, I ended up, the PGA Tour hired me. It's really, really cool. They hired me in 2016 and 2017 to shoot. In 2016, they hired me to shoot the Players Championship, which is their big, some people call it the fifth major. It's the PGA Tour's major event in at the Sawgrass, TPC Sawgrass in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, where the PGA Tour headquarters is, to do social media with my iPhone. And they hired me for one event as a tryout, and I ended up like stringing it along to, they ended up hiring me for a total of 8 events over 2 years. So it was really fun, really amazing, because at the time they had a big staff of amazing photographers, and for a lot of their big events, they would hire a big crew of freelancers, and so they have amazing photographers with, real cameras and big lenses and stuff. And I'm there with, my phone, a charger, and an extra battery and a credential. And it's hot. And I can remember like one of the first days I run into, the legend Fred Vuich, and Fred is just laughing and giving me a ton of shit, like, because he's hot and he's sweaty and he's carrying around all this Nikon gear, and I'm there with my phone and my charger, and it was so much fun because I know my limitations. I'm not going to take certain tight action pictures, but I'm creating paintings. I know my limitations, and I'm doing behind the scenes stuff in the locker room and doing these pictures with the guys at the range at sunrise or at sunset, and I had a blast. It was so fun. I really had a lot of fun, but unfortunately after a while, social media, it was still, people never know what to do with social media, and the PGA Tour social media accounts started going more and more to video, picking up the network video from NBC or whatever network was televising the events, and so they would use my stuff. But then, more and more, it's all, they don't think anyone wants pictures. They just want to see network, video highlights. But it was a great experience. It was really fun. I mean, I did the President's Cup at Liberty National Golf Course in Jersey City in 2017. That was my last event. And I shot portraits. The iPhone had come out with this new portrait mode where you can do like a black background. Looks like you shot people in a studio. And I got President Obama, Clinton, and Bush. I shot the 3 presidents within about, you look at the timestamps, within a matter of like 3 minutes. I shot 3 presidents combined. I grabbed them, shook their hands, and got them to pose with my iPhone on the first tee box on the first day.
That's awesome.
It was fun.
That's great.
It was really good experience.
Yeah, so I do know, and I want people to definitely, is the website Brad Mangin Photography?
It's manginphotography.com.
Okay, manginphotography.com.
Yeah,
I saw some of those.
photography.com.
Yeah, and I'll post the link, because I definitely want people to go and check that out, because not only is your baseball and your early work just so amazing, but just the fact what all you've been able to accomplish, what all you've been able to shoot is just awesome. My next question really is about composition and framing. So since the iPhone back then was square, but then, and Instagram and everything changed, and you could go, out of the box, so to say, how did you approach that? Looking at composition, looking at framing. Is that something that every time you did take an iPhone photo, or even with your regular gear, that you look at? Because I want younger listeners to really kind of understand it's not just point at an athlete and push the button.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, at SI for years, so many times I had so many assignments. I was very lucky, again, working with Steve Fine as a director and Nate Gordon as my baseball editor for 15 years. I'd get so many assignments that were, you got a 5 o'clock game, go shoot the light, try and get a leading off. And for those of you that don't know, Sports Illustrated comes out once a month. It's not the magazine it was. Sports Illustrated during the heyday, starting in about 97 and Jimmy Colton was the editor for this section. On the front of the magazine, they had 3 double trucks in a row called Leading Off. And it was like the 3 best sports pictures that Jimmy Colton could find that week. And they were timely, and they were amazing. And it was like a photo contest every week, and you tried to get a leading off picture. And back then there was a budget, and, you know, you'd get an assignment a lot of times just, you know, they had photographers like me. You know, I was a freelancer. I was not a contractor staffer. I was a freelancer that did a lot of work for them here in the Bay Area. And if something was going on, they knew that I had good parks to shoot in, and they trusted me. It's like, go shoot the light, go to a weird spot, go upstairs, go wherever, try and get a leading off. So that was easy. That's a horizontal. So many times I was locked in, and you're shooting horizontal because, you know, that was the holy grail for the magazine, you know, because you're not shooting a story where you're Peter E. Miller and you're locked into a vertical, because Peter's, you know, had over 150 covers of the magazine. You know, there were a lot of times where you're trying to get, you know, you're trying to get a leading off. It's funny. But then, you know, a lot of us work for trading card companies back in the day, and they're vertical. And you're shooting vertical, and you know, it's a different mindset. And sure, some trading cards are horizontal, but you know, they want verticals. And so a lot depends on what the background is, depends on what the light is, depends on the mood I'm in. You know, everything is different and fluctuates. I always say, you know, it's baseball. I could just bore people to tears on baseball and swings. You know, there are batters that have tight 2-hand finishes that you can fit into a nice tight vertical compact frame, and then there's, you know, the batters with the long finishes that are horizontal frame, and there are these, you know, guys now that wear the C flaps that make horseshit pictures that I just don't even want to shoot. That you got to shoot them from the other side and hope they go the other way, and you hope that, you know, and it's a long finish, and then that's a horizontal frame. So a lot of things are knowing your players and knowing their swings and knowing their finishes. So, you know, you don't want to shoot a guy with a long finish, tight vertical, because then you're going to cut off the hands and the arms, and you're going to have a dog shit picture. So there's a lot of things, and that's what was always fun working with my guy Nate at SI, where we would do stories on certain players, and we would just study and dissect their swings. Okay, you know, I'm shooting the game tomorrow, and I'm going to get 4 at-bats. And just because you get 4 at-bats doesn't mean you have a really good chance of getting a picture, because you could strike out, walk, pop up, whatever, and you have 0 pictures. So you got to go back the next day, the next day, the next day. And so when we're talking, you know, Nate, what do you think? Well, you know, he goes, you know, Juan Gonzalez was a great hitter for a period of time, and his pictures were terrible. He would cover his face from third base, and it's just his head down guy. And the pictures were terrible. We could never get good pictures. And some guys are like that. I mean, some guys are easy. Some guys have swings like butter. They're head up guy, and they look great coming out of the box. And but we would always talk about, you know, because our goal was always get the best pictures possible. And, you know, I'm just rambling because I like to talk about this stuff because I care. Because each guy is different. And same thing with pitching. I mean, we had Tim Lincecum for the Giants for years, and that guy, you couldn't make a bad picture. He looked great from first base. He looked great from third base. He looked great from behind the plate. He looked great. You know, there's some pitchers that look horrible from every spot except for one because of the way they throw. And then Timmy looked great from everywhere. And so when he's pitching, you know, especially because he would get a new haircut, so his whole hairstyle changed, so you got to get a whole new set of pictures. You would run around and shoot him from a different spot every inning because, you know, he might go 6 or 7 innings, but you want to get him from a different spot because he looks good from every different spot. It's you know, there's so much involved in when you're shooting these things, and it's, you know, it's not just showing up, sitting at first base, because every lazy photographer goes to first base and just camping there. It's, you know, it's not.
Totally agree. Yeah, it is amazing. With the world of photography constantly evolving, and I know you're not shooting as much as you used to, like what kind of new technologies have you looked into? Do you follow that? Do you upgrade gear? Is there anything along those lines that you feel like you kind of keep up with?
I keep up with nothing. I've never even held a mirrorless camera. I have old shitty cameras that next time they break, I probably won't be able to get them repaired. How's that? But I can still make good pictures. So that's my short answer. I'm completely been run over by everything. The camera companies should be ashamed of themselves. They've completely let the prices and everything just get out of control. A normal photographer can't afford this stuff. It's an absolute joke. When I was working all the time, I was able to stay on top of it until about, 12 years ago. Publishing went bad, and when the money stops coming in, it's I just thank God that I never signed bad contracts and I own all my copyright, and I'm able to make money on all my old man pictures from the 80s.
That's huge, and definitely something that you don't see anymore. I know you mentioned Neil Leifer, Michael Zagaris. Any other photographers that have influenced you in your work, in your career?
Oh, so many. I mean, one of them, dear friend who we lost back in January, the great Peter Reed Miller. We had a memorial service for him in May. Peter was amazing. Peter, learned a lot from Peter, man. Oh my God. Yeah. Got to see a lot of people at his service. Being on the West Coast here, I was lucky to be around some amazing, got to work with John McDonough, who I hadn't seen in several years. He was at the service. Robert Beck, worked with Beck a lot. Beck was so fun to work with. He would always sandbag you after a game. He'd be like, "Oh, I didn't get anything. My pictures suck." And then he'd end up with the cover, the opener, and every picture in between. Right. And Robert Beck could shoot anything and shoot it so well. And of course, VJ Lovero, just the best baseball photographer I ever worked with, who we lost in January of 2004. He was so fun. It's about the people. VJ taught me how to like order dinner in a restaurant, how to stay in a hotel. He taught me how to do things as an adult, because I was a moron when I was a kid. He taught me how to stay in a nice hotel and don't stay at a shitty hotel. Stay at a nice hotel. Don't stay at the shitty hotel at the airport.
I've stayed in a lot of those airport hotels.
Man, he stayed in a nice hotel, and just the people, man, it's the best. And I had all these thoughts before I knew I was talking to you this morning, and I just, when I think of St. Louis, I think of you and Dillip and Albert and Seale and all of us going to Pat's for the greasiest fried chicken for lunch.
The best. Yeah.
Before a World Series game in 04 or 06 or 2011. And
I see that picture we shot on the rocks, right across the street. I see that picture pop up here and there. It's always a great memory. I think I try to remember. I think the last time I shot a game or saw you at a game was 2013 World Series in Boston. Yeah, I know you had Pete Souza with you, which was really cool. Yeah, that's the last time I saw you. So it's been a while.
That became like a national political scandal where certain Republican web. Souza was spending American taxpayers' money to be at the World Series, and people were trying to get a hold of me that like I arranged this scandal, and Pete, flew there on Air Force One to shoot the World Series, and it became hysterical. Yeah, that was quite a thing. That was funny. Oh my God. Yeah,
that was funny. Do you still utilize social media much?
Not much. My last Instagram post was a picture from like 3 weeks ago of me and 3 old photographer buddies, a group picture of us at a Giants game. For me to post a picture, it's got to be a good picture. If I'm going to post a picture, I got to really like it. I post more pictures. I act as like Michael Zagaris' PR guy because he doesn't post anymore. So right. I'm always like promoting stuff that Z does, and because people love Z, and so like Z's always doing new things, and so I'll post stuff, to promote Z. I'll post pictures of my cats. They don't get as many likes.
I hear you. I do that too. Do you look at much social media?
Oh, I look at way too much. Yeah, it's scary. Things that come up that tell me how many hours a day I averaged online is not healthy. But yeah, I look. I love looking. I try and the algorithm's all screwed up. So, just because I follow someone doesn't mean I get to see their stuff, but I follow way too many people. I love looking at pictures. I see some stuff. I don't see everything because of the algorithms, but things come in bunches. I love looking at photography and seeing what people are doing. It's always fun.
I know this is one of the hardest ones, but do you have any certain words of advice if a young photographer that you can tell is really into it, not just somebody oh, I like sports photography? What kind of advice would you give that person?
I see really talented young photographers succeeding. I see kids getting jobs with teams, with, the pro teams or colleges or university. The pro teams treat so many of their people like shit. They grind them. They pay them next to nothing, but they employ you. And I see on my social media, NFL, especially now, they have a first-string photographer, they have a second-string photographer, they have a third-string photographer, they have an intern. And what happens, the same with baseball, they leave. Eventually they hit the wall. They're poor, they're broke, whatever. Their spirit is broke, and they leave, and they do the post. I'm making a change, looking forward to the new show. And they leave, and then the new person, the second string, moves up to the first string, whatever, or they hire. Like I just saw a woman at the Jets left, and then yesterday I see a young lady who was the 49ers intern / fourth string got hired as the Jets brand new team photographer. Right. Amazing. Sure, she's a nice, fine young lady, probably going to make $28,000 a year in New York. Welcome to New York City, as the Jets team photographer. There are opportunities for young people because that's who they hire, and they work your ass off. But there are opportunities for the young people, and you because they're hiring. I know there's opportunities because I see these people get hired. The young lady just got hired by the Jets yesterday. So people are getting hired.
That's the thing with newspapers going out of business, just the SI being not the weekly magazine, ESPN the magazine, all that stuff being gone. It really is so much different. And I always tell young sports photographers, go shoot the Little League team, go to the local athletic association. You're probably going to end up doing better there with parents that have money, buying a ton of pictures from you. And it also will help you in your work, will help you learn how to shoot better.
I talk with Zagaris about this all the time. The big thing that really sucks for the young people is they don't work with editors, or especially I see it with young kids that work for these wire services now. They keep shooting the same stuff every night, and then they post pictures on their Instagram, and everyone says, "Fire, fire, you crushed it!" And they'll post 20 pictures from a game, and one might be good, the rest aren't. And it's because they didn't have the chance to work at a newspaper or work somewhere where there's editors that people just hammer them and make them cry and tell them their pictures stink. There's just not learning. And same with a young team photographer. So no one, you don't have Steve Fine yelling at you. You don't have Nate Gordon telling you what's a good picture or not. And so it's this treadmill of mediocrity because there's no editing going on. And that's a huge bummer for the young photographers, is they just keep shooting the same stuff, and then it's all the people on social media, all their friends, that just tell them how they crushed it and how much they love them and how great their work is. And that I feel bad about because
that's tough.
They're not getting the opportunity to grow in that way.
Yeah, not at all. And that's the thing. I've worked with social media teams and people that really don't, like you say, they don't know about either sports photography or the sport that I'm shooting at the time. And I'll see them post pictures just like, okay, I needed to send you X amount of photos after this big play or whatever. You pick the worst one. It's like, then I get mad at myself for not picking, this is the one you should post and just send that one photo. So yeah, I wish a lot of these social media teams would learn a little bit more, or even just research what makes a great hockey photo, what makes a great baseball photo, football photo, what do people like to see? One of my last questions, is there any specific project or concept that you wish you would have done while you were in your heyday?
Good question. No, I mean, I just, I really enjoyed what I did. I always blame myself for not being, I guess, more ambitious. I was terrible at idea. Like I would watch, Robert Seale's a very good friend of mine, and I would go on some portrait shoots with him or watch him do portraits and that stuff. And I could never, ever, ever do what he did. And like at a newspaper, when I worked at a newspaper, I could bring umbrellas or a softbox and set up and shoot someone's portrait, and it'd be fine for the bullshit newspaper, and it'd be fine. But once I started doing work for SI, I couldn't do it. And because they got Peter R. Miller doing portraits for them, they have great people doing portraits for them, and it's got to be great. And so, and you get a reputation. You can either do that or not. You're an action guy, you're a features guy, and I wish I was better. I wish I had that thing inside me, that confidence or that skill. It would have been better for me to be a photographer that they could call on to do both the portraits and the action. A lot of times we do a story and I would do the action stuff, but then they'd have to hire someone else to do the portrait. That was a bummer. That's just, it wasn't in me. And because it couldn't just be a bullshit portrait, it had to be really damn good. And that wasn't me. And, and I know that. And it's 50-50. The cover or the opener is either going to be a portrait or it's going to be action. And it's going to be one or the other. Or if the cover's portrait, the opener's going to be action, or vice versa. But I learned early on that it wasn't happening for me there. And it's no one's fault. It's not that someone pigeonholed me, or I didn't have it in here. I would have been like in a mental hospital many times if I would have tried to. And so that's one thing I wish I would have been able to. I don't know. I don't think it would have been humanly possible for me. I don't know if I would have needed to be hypnotized a million times or taken like a crazy amount of weird drugs to get past that. But I also knew it, and it was like, there's plenty of photographers that think they can do good portraits, and the portraits are crap. And I would watch someone like Peter or Seale, a great portrait photographer, they can walk in a room, look around, I'm going to put a light there, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and then they do what they do. It's like, holy shit, how did you come up with that? I would lose my mind. That would have made me a much better photographer, much more in demand. That would have been a whole thing, but that was nothing that was ever going to happen for me. I loved what I did. I was incredibly comfortable at the ballpark. I was very confident in what I did and my knowledge of the game, and I knew that I could do a good job for whoever hired me. I could be at a World Series, and I was very confident in what I was doing, shooting a World Series game. I knew the players, I knew the game, I knew what I was doing, and I knew I could make pictures. That was not an issue for me. So I always felt good about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, one thing that's so different that you can relate to, and you mentioned your relationship with players, and I always talk about that too, the camaraderie. I used to do spring training all the time. Don't do it anymore. But now these kids, I don't know them, they don't know me, and you can't just walk up to them and I want to pose a certain way or, do some special shoot. It's just so different that you can walk into a dugout and just sit down and talk to a player, and you know him and he knows who you are. And those days are just long gone. I do know that I'm sure I'll definitely want to talk to you again about some of the, you've worked with so many great photographers. I know people are interested in that, how you get along with them, and which is such a big thing when you talk about people. You talk about, stories and learning things just by talking to people, like you mentioned, a good restaurant, a hotel. It doesn't even have to be photographic, but it just, those relationships that you've created over the years, unfortunately we're getting older, we lose some of our friends, but that's one of the coolest things. And I really believe that, I want to rack your brain on that one, tell Zagaris stories and stuff like that, VJ stories. I think that'd be really fun, but I really appreciate your time today. I think this was just awesome. I'm so glad to see you, sort of. So I just, I hope you enjoyed this, and, I really look forward to keeping in touch with you more.
Scott, thank you so much for taking the time and thinking of me, and I had a blast today, and it's, I miss doing a World Series in St. Louis with you and your crew, and this has been the next best thing. It's really been fun.
Yeah, hopefully down the road I can get, like more people involved as far as get a bunch of us in a room. We're all on our laptops or whatever, but at least we get to see each other and talk and tell stories that way. I think people would really love to see that.
I'd love that.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks a lot, Brad. Really appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Scott.